everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our CCK Live discussion. My name is Maura Black. I'm a managing attorney at CCK. I'm joined by Emma Peterson, also a managing attorney, and Nick Briggs, an accredited claims agent. Today we're doing a Q&A session about the PACT Act. So we've provided a number of posts already, some videos and some blog posts about the PACT Act. We took some questions that we received from people who have watched our content before, and also from people who are wondering how the PACT Act is going to affect them, and some common questions that we were able to pull from everyone, and we have put them all together into what will hopefully be a helpful Q&A session today. So just wanted to start with an introduction and an overview about the PACT Act. We've been through these particulars many times before, but just for anyone who's unaware, on August 10th, 2022, the President signed the Honoring Our PACT Act into law. This bill is the most significant expansion of benefits for toxic exposed veterans in more than 30 years, and the act will do the following. This is not an exhaustive list, but the highlights are: it will expand presumptions related to Agent Orange exposure to include in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Guam, American Samoa, and Johnston Atoll. It will add 2 new conditions to the presumptive list for herbicide exposure. It will add over 20 burn pit and toxic exposure related conditions to VA's list of presumptions for Gulf War and post 9/11 vets. It will make changes to retroactive dependency and indemnity compensation, assist veterans and their families affected by the water at Camp Lejeune, and expand and improve VA resources, research, and training programs related to military toxic exposures. So this bill, as we've said before, will impact millions of veterans and their families as they file initial claims or appeals. So if you are in the group of veterans contemplated by the Act, I think it's fair to say that there will be some changes to the approach that you may have in filing claims and appeals. So as such, it's to be expected that a lot of people, including ourselves, will be dealing with some questions flowing from the changes. So the first thing is a very common question that we've had in mind. I want to start with you, Nick. Can you talk to us about when the presumptions will become effective? A lot of people have asked, when will these presumptions take effect? How do they affect my claim if it's already been pending? How do they affect my appeal? So can you explain that for us?
Absolutely. So one thing to note up front is that there's been a relatively recent change on this front that will make the answer to this question a whole lot easier. Originally, the bill included a staggered rollout depending on what the condition was, with some becoming effective in 2022, some 2023, and some 2024. But in his signing press conference last week, President Biden and Secretary McDonough announced that all new 23 presumptive conditions are going to become effective from August 10th, 2022, when the bill was signed into law. So they've removed the confusion, and this isn't in writing anywhere. This is going to wait. This change will be reflected when VA ultimately publishes their final regulations implementing the PACT Act. But for now, the answer is a very easy. Once they grant service connection, it's going to be effective from August 10th, 2022. But just because it's technically effective from that date doesn't necessarily mean that veterans are going to have those benefits granted right now from that date. Because as VA also announced, they're not going to be adjudicating these claims until early 2023, once VA has fully implemented the regs and they have some guidance for their adjudicators to work with. And when we talk about these conditions, we talk about the conditions themselves and covered veterans. So again, we've covered the idea of a covered veteran before in other videos. But basically, if the veteran served in a number of countries after August 1990, or in the airspace above those countries, including Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and a few others, or if the veteran served after September 2001 in Afghanistan, Djibouti, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, they're going to be presumed to have been exposed to burn pits and other environmental toxins. That's the presumption of exposure that the bill creates. And then some of the 23 conditions that are also going to be presumptively related to that exposure includes kidney cancer, brain cancer, melanoma, asthma, emphysema, COPD, so on and so forth. So there's a long list of new conditions that are going to be presumptively related. And as long as you can show that you served in one of those countries mentioned before, you're going to be one of those covered veterans that's going to get that effective date from August 10th, 2022.
Great. And that's a great refresher about the locations where the presumptions of exposure will apply and the types of conditions for which there'll be another presumption of an in-service disability. So thank you for that overview, Nick. Emma, a slightly similar question, and Nick kind of already touched on this, but if a veteran is filing a claim because they believe that they have a condition that's now covered by the PACT Act, or if they're filing an appeal and they wish to say that the PACT Act is relevant to that appeal and should be the reason why they prevail on that claim or appeal, when can we expect VA to start making decisions that will contemplate the PACT Act?
Absolutely. So Nick mentioned this, but it's worth repeating. VA has said they are not going to start processing PACT Act related benefits until January 2023. They are indicating that they have to wait for funding approval from Congress, and they need to put the needed systems in place before they can process these claims. Folks out there that went through the Blue Water, Navy, and Procopio claims will remember that VA stopped, adjudicating these and waited until they had the regulations and systems and training in place. And I imagine they'll do the same here. They're going to need to update all their raters, their frontline raters, the ROs, make sure they're trained up on all the conditions and locations, update their internal manual, and most importantly, get the regs out. So don't expect them to act until next year. However, in addition to that pause, VA currently has a massive backlog of claims and appeals, and it just seems to be increasing day over day. So it's likely that veterans will experience significant wait times before their claims are processed. So I wouldn't wait, is the long and the short of it. If you think that this applies to you, don't wait until they're up and running. Get your claim in now. Get in line so that you can be ahead of the curve when it comes to adjudicating these issues. Again, probably not going to see any action until January 2023.
Very helpful, and that's good context that applies not just, I think, to the PACT Act, but also to a lot of things in the VA benefits world. A lot of times, I'm sure people listening have had this experience. The process is a lot of chasing a retroactive benefit because it takes VA a long time to figure stuff out and to make sure that they're making good quality decisions on claims and appeals. We know people have the experience of having to appeal the same denial multiple times. The PACT Act is going to be, I would expect, a little more of the same in that we need to wait for the raters to get caught up with their training, for the regulations to be updated, for the people making decisions to understand how the PACT Act and its specific provisions are going to apply to the appeal that's on their desk in front of them. So that's great, Emma. Thank you. And an excellent reminder for everyone to just, if you think you're going to be interested in filing something or filing an appeal, go ahead and file it. A lot of the retroactive benefits have to work themselves out in exactly that way, in a retroactive manner. So definitely good to get yourself in line. A slightly similar question about effective dates, and I'll go back to you, Nick. Will the PACT Act cover retroactive pay from the date of a veteran's claim if there's a provision in the PACT Act that allows them to prevail on their claim for benefits?
Not necessarily. It's going to depend on the date of claim itself. Again, this is a new law creating new presumptions, and it's well established that in the VA system and VA laws generally, when there's a change in the law, it's only going to be retroactive from the date of the change, in this case, August 10th, 2022. However, that doesn't mean that you can't necessarily prevail on an earlier effective date overall. It just means that you're only going to get the benefit of the presumption from August 10th, 2022 forward. You still have the possibility of appealing for an earlier effective date and hopefully getting service connection granted on a direct basis. We often see this with many of our Camp Lejeune water contamination veterans, where VA has adjudicated those claims under the presumption. They've granted service connection from the March 2017 date that was established for that presumption. And then if the claim was pending prior to that date, those veterans have had to appeal for earlier effective dates and show why the medical evidence has established service connection on a direct basis. However, there is a carve out for eligible DIC claimants that they should receive retroactive pay back to the date of their original claim. But otherwise, there's going to be a new generation of earlier effective date appeals to try and get these veterans benefits all the way back to their original date of claim.
Agree. Also very helpful. I think that takes us through most of the effective date retroactive benefits type questions. Hopefully that was helpful for those of you wondering when these provisions will actually help those of you with pending claims and appeals. Emma, another question that we've received is, what if I qualify as a covered veteran due to that veteran's exposure to burn pits, but this person does not yet have symptoms or a diagnosed condition? Is there any world in which they might want to file a claim for benefits despite not having an existing diagnosis or symptoms of a particular condition?
Sure. So I would take those one at a time. So let's say you don't have a particular diagnosis, but you are now presumptively exposed to burn pits. Don't forget that there's a whole other world of presumptions out there for Persian Gulf War veterans. So if you served in Southwest Asia, PGW 1 or 2, so Iraq, Kuwait, etc., the provisions of undiagnosed illness still apply to you. So you could still seek service connection for the collection of symptoms that you're suffering from. It doesn't have to be due to burn pits. Don't forget that those statutes and regulations are still out there to help you. If you have no symptoms, though, and you were exposed to burn pits, but nothing's going on, I wouldn't encourage you to apply for benefits. However, I think that there is some value into continuing, go see your doctor, report your symptoms via the burn pit registry, or just get signed up with that, because, you want to be vigilant. I'm not trying to be like doom and gloom and say you're definitely going to come down with something, but you just want to stay ahead of it because there's 23 conditions that are presumptively related. There was a lot of really terrible stuff getting spewed out of those burn pits. So, the option of being in the burn pit registry is available to you. No harm in signing up for it. The other thing to keep in mind is that if let's say you have a diagnosis or just some very mild symptoms, then you probably do want to apply for benefits, because even if you get a non-compensable rating, a 0% rating, it's in place. And if it ever becomes worse, then it's going to be much easier for you just to apply for an increased rating. And it also establishes, the effective date for other purposes. So, if it is diagnosed or you have some symptoms, it might be worth it. But again, make sure that you're, keeping up with your treatment, get established with the burn pit registry. And, there's no harm in applying if you have a diagnosis or some mild symptoms. You might as well just get it locked up.
Great. That's really helpful. I think that's great advice about remembering to keep in mind that VA will care about what diagnosis you have and what symptoms that you have, but just because you may not have either or, it's definitely good to keep in mind those other presumptions for Gulf War era veterans, and also to stay on top of treatment, because at any point at which you get a diagnosis or do start to have symptoms, you'll already be ahead of the game, so to speak, in terms of planning to file something or to appeal something. We've touched on this a little bit, but this is a question that I think people are thinking about logistically, like how they go about dealing with the PACT Act as it is rolled out at a time when they've already been filing and appealing for benefits for a specific condition. So Nick, if someone is appealing right now, they're in the process of fighting a VA denial of, let's say, service connection for a condition, and it's now covered by the PACT Act, or the PACT Act helps this person be able to argue that they were indeed exposed to toxins during the military service. How should a person think about handling their appeal now that the PACT Act has passed sort of midway through their pursuit of benefits?
Sure. Thanks, Maura. So if your claim is currently pending in the appeal stage, you've filed an NOD to the board, or you're awaiting a higher level review decision, you need to continue with your appeal. There's nothing that you need to do because it's already pending. You've met your obligation by filing the correct form, and VA is going to apply the new rules automatically. What that means is once they start adjudicating these claims, they should just issue a new rating decision granting you service connection from August 2022. But the benefit of having an already pending appeal is that you've preserved your effective date So you do have the ability to then appeal for an earlier effective date for service connection, potentially establishing your benefits on a direct basis. If you're a veteran who was previously denied and you're about to file an appeal, if you're within that 1 year mark, you should absolutely do that as soon as possible so that the claim is still pending, and that VA will apply those rules once they start adjudicating these claims. If you were denied many years ago, more than 12 months ago, you should consider filing a supplemental claim, again, as soon as possible. That way the issue's pending, and VA can apply those rules to you once they start adjudicating these claims early next year.
I'm sensing a bit of a theme, which is that file something. It's always important to think about, the law has changed, or VA will view my claim differently, or my appeal will be more successful now with the PACT Act provisions. Don't count on VA to do anything affirmatively on its own. Again, as Emma explained earlier, we are looking at early 2023 for VA to start adjudicating these claims for the very first time. So I would not assume that the passage of this act is going to constitute some kind of action with respect to your claims and appeals. As Nick just explained, it's really important to keep your appeal going, to maintain continuous pursuit of the benefits that you've been seeking, and to make sure that you're filing something when you feel as though you want to seek benefits for it, even if it feels early on, even if your symptoms aren't severe, even if you're still waiting for a doctor's letter with a diagnosis. So really good advice from both of you, and thank you. If a person is already receiving VA disability benefits, a question that's come up, Nick, I'll ask you this one as well. If a person's already receiving VA benefits, does this change the rate of compensation that they receive, or their rating percentage, or anything about their existing monthly payment from VA?
The simple answer here is no, because the bill affects the presumption of service connection and the presumption of exposure. Veterans who are already service connected have already met those requirements. Take a Thailand veteran who's already established they served close to the perimeter of one of the Royal Thai Air Force bases. They've already shown their exposure. They've already been granted service connection for their heart condition or their diabetes. That part's already done with. So anything that the PACT Act might have affected has already been resolved in that veteran's favor. If they think they warrant an increased rating for their conditions, they should certainly consider and file for it. But the PACT Act won't have any bearing on that. That's just going to be a question of how severe your conditions happen to be.
Great. And lastly, Emma, the types of recovery that we've been talking about so far have been very VBA focused, Veterans Benefits Administration focused. So are there any provisions of the Act that provide for a different type of recovery than veterans are used to receiving from VBA?
Yes, Maura. What a lead in. No. And we have videos that we've put out on this, but as people probably have heard by now, the PACT Act, in addition to opening doors to traditional VA benefits, has also created a federal cause of action for veterans and their family members that were living or stationed at Camp Lejeune. And so that is different. It's a different system, separate process, different benefit, settlement, damages to be awarded at the end of that. But the PACT Act doesn't do anything additional in terms of VBA benefits for Camp Lejeune. So keep in mind, though, that if you want more information about that federal cause of action, please be sure to check out our blog and our other videos on that specific topic, because it warrants its own discussion.
Perfect. And that's a great segue into some closing thoughts that we have, which are, we have a lot of material on this topic on our website, cck-law.com. We've got written materials, we've got other recordings about the PACT Act. If you are interested in learning more, please visit our YouTube channel or our website. You can also leave a comment on this video with a question if you have one. We're doing our best to work through some of the questions. Some of them have inspired questions that we hadn't really thought of, and we're trying to stay ahead and think ahead to how this is all going to affect you all out there. So I'm sure we'll have more information at a later date about other Q&A or other commonly received questions. So please subscribe to our channel to be able to stay up to date on the updates that we can provide. Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you so much, Emma. It was great having you both on today. Thank you all for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.